Hi, this is Morgana Ray, and yesterday I interviewed my husband Devin Galladay on love and Kabbalah and maybe 50 or more questions that my readers and my audience sent in for this live webinar. Unfortunately, the sound at the beginning of the recording was terrible, so we had to cut out the beginning, which is why I'm introducing him to you now this way. Fortunately, despite the technical problems that we had in the beginning, Devin was so fascinating that almost everybody stayed on this webinar for the full 90 minutes. So if you want to know how to open up your heart to love after you've had your heart broken, why someone says I love you and then disappears, how to get better results in love and life, how to use the tree of life to get better results, and many, many other questions that came in, then you're going to love this. It's going to be funny, and it's going to be spiritual, and it's going to be different. It's not going to sound like anything you've heard before. So welcome, and I am so pleased to introduce you to my husband, Devin Galladay.
What was the biggest concept about love you changed your mind about, and what experiences led to that transformation?
All right, so I'm going to tell you an obnoxious story, because that's the first thing that came to my mind. Is that, all right, so I had just quit smoking cigarettes, and I decided to get healthy. And this is 25 years ago. I was fairly penniless. I was kind of studying. I was living in my mother's house. It was horrible. And every morning, what I would do is I'd put on these old Nike high tops that had sort of like holes in the bottom because, again, I was penniless. And I would run, and it was winter, and it was rainy, and so the water from the puddles would kind of come up through the bottom of the shoes. And so, but I had this habit. Every morning I'd go out running. And so I put on these Nike high tops. And this one particular morning, there was something sort of like impeding me putting on the shoe. And so I shook out its contents, and out rolled a severed rat head. Yes, I can almost hear you gasp from here. And so out rolled out the rat head, staring up at me with that sort of marble black eye and the sort of snarl that rats kind of inherently have. And immediately I recognized this is sort of like that thing that cats do as a peace offering for love. And so clearly my cat loved me by offering me this rat head. So anyway, after I got through sort of like the panic of it, I kind of looked over to the side, and I realized that there was sort of like a little rat arm, and maybe a foot away from that, there was sort of like some little rat gizzards, and it was kind of horrifying. And there goes my wife going somewhere. So anyway, I'm sort of, looking at this mess, and so, my first reaction is it's really not okay to have a half a rat in my house. So I quite literally went and got a dustbin and scooped up all the bits and pieces. And then I put my high top on, and then I was running out the house when I realized, where's sort of the rest of the rats? So anyway, I went back inside, and I looked under, dressers in the bed, and looked around for the bits and pieces, because it's really kind of, it's like absolutely not okay to have bits of a rat sort of in my house. It's equally as bad to have bits of rat that you can't see in my house. So it was sort of, for me, an analogy to a much larger thing, is that I was realizing that, like smoking was sort of like a tip of an iceberg, so to speak, but there was a lot of stuff underneath that said that smoking was okay. And some of my behaviors, particularly in relationships, of how I perceived what it is that I wanted for a relationship and how I would move forward within them, that would that allow me to find love. Because I think part of the reason why I did the things that I did was almost like a panic kind of disgruntledness, sort of like almost like an underlining malaise about not getting the kind of love, and not kind of getting the things that I wanted out of life. And so I kind of I think probably up until that point, I would tell you that I was looking for love in order to kind of like, secretly speaking, to kind of be validated. Like if I had this right woman on my arm, she would do all the perfect things. I would feel good about myself. I wouldn't have to drink and smoke, and I wouldn't have to sit on the couch and watch television all day or eat a sack of cookies or any of that kind of stuff. And so really what it was all about was, turning sort of like this thing into an inside job. And for me, that's kind of what Kabbalah was all about. It was sort of like it explained and it went into the details about how our five senses are limited to really kind of what we can perceive and understand. Problem is, I'm left with solely only my filter. And so the goal of Kabbalah for me was, how do I get beyond my five senses and my understanding of stuff to get a deeper understanding of myself, to find happiness, to find love, and all that kind of good stuff. And so, as you might imagine, it's sort of worked out for me. And so when Morgana talks about, about getting married and all that kind of stuff, really for me, the deeper thing is, how do I make a marriage work in a consistent way? And so once we found each other and once I understood and knew, like I could feel it, like, okay, this is the right person for me, I had to make really clear decisions. So the concept really was about finding a rat in the shoe and then moving forward from there. You're still on mute.
Okay. So, I saw that we had an echo, so I just moved to a different room so that we'd have less echo, even though I would love to stay in the same room as Devin. So this question came up a bunch of times in different ways. How does a person know that they're with the right person for the long term? And I also want to tie into that, let's say you've made a commitment to somebody, how do you make the relationship work when you want to quit or kill the other person?
Oh, yeah. Quitting and killing are really not useful to a long-term happy relationship. So, first off, how do you know? I don't know if you ever really know. I mean, I think in movies they portray sort of there's a certain lightning bolt that comes down. And I don't think that's the way it works. I actually think it's the opposite of that. I think, I kind of want to get into a little bit more of the Kabbalah stuff just so you understand where I'm coming from, but I'll try to answer this question first, is that when we are kind of separate and apart, our basic mindset is kind of like, how do I take care of me? And that frequently turns into what it is that I can get from something in order to feel love, happiness. And so when I feel sort of like this great, fulfilling desire, I assume that must be the thing. Oh, there's this wild sexual chemistry, and we're worried about these sort of like messages from beyond that are unmistakable, and all we can do is glom onto the person next to us because it's so clear and obvious. And then, every single relationship I've personally had and every personal relationship I've seen where there's this sort of over-the-top love, it tends to not last. And Kabbalah would sort of describe that as a disconnect. And that disconnect is really sort of like based on the illusion that our senses are giving us good information. And the best way I can describe that is that more often than not, when I have problems, I think it's the end of the world kind of problem, and it's very rare that I can by myself see to the other side of what that problem is. I've had millions of these kinds of problems. They come and go with every passing day, and I don't quite see it, and I don't quite get it. So ultimately what it comes down to is, look for things like consistency. Look for things like no drama. Like if you're having lots of energy towards something, and there is a certain amount of chaos, that's not it. Really what you're looking for is sort of like a decision to connect with somebody, and that's sort of like an inside job. And then when that person comes along, you have to be willing to kind of, with the Kabbalah, with the Q that I've also studied for 20 years, there is on the tarot card on the first one, the zero card, the trump, is sort of the fool card. And what it frequently shows is sort of like this happy-lucky-go knucklehead walking with a knapsack, walking right off the edge of the cliff. And that is sort of like one of the higher ideals that you have to deal with in terms of what love really is. Because love isn't this sort of short flash of energy. What it is sort of like a consistent and gradual thing where you're basically putting somebody else's needs above your own. And, you know, without getting too personal, like my marriage with Morgana has a lot to do with my desire to put her needs above my own. Because love ultimately, this is a buddy of mine, Dave, says this a lot, is that love is an action and that action is service. So I try to move forward with conscious, selfless action in order to give her what it is that I hope that she wants. And hopefully we've developed a relationship that is strong enough that if she needs help, if she needs support, if she needs thoughts, ideas, that I'm there to provide those things for her so she can lead a happier life. And by the way, this isn't all about altruism. I guarantee you that when I take extra effort and extra time to provide her those things, especially when I really don't want to, I lead a much better, much more happy life.
That's true for you as a guy. And I know we have some guys on the call, but we also have a bunch of women. Mm-hmm. So what happens for the women when they are in a relationship and they're putting a lot into the relationship and they aren't getting their needs met? I saw a few times stuff about how do I find a relationship with a man who's in it for the real thing? How do I get my partner to make love to me and not just be there for sex? Something about, you know, the difference between love and sex. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's a tricky thing, and I don't want to set the room ablaze, but what more often than not happens, and again, I'm going to talk a lot about Kabbalah and sort of like the nature of our relationships with each other and the universe, is that there are kinds of love. I'll give you a perfect example. When my daughter was 2, she wanted crackers or animal crackers, and she wanted bits and pieces. We'd go shopping, and she'd sit in that metal cart, and she'd want stuff. And there would be times when I wanted to give from my heart because I knew it would give her happy. It would give her happiness. Then there were other times where she would scream and yell in the cart and sort of like, I want it. And so it was sort of like, I love you, and I'm giving you this thing if you shut up, which is sort of like, kind of like the opposite of love. And so I'm kind of going into this place in part because when I've spoken with not only men, but a lot of women in the past, when we start talking about, well, what are we looking for here, it frequently has to do with, I want the relationship that I'm in to sort of validate me, fix me, give me these things. And so a lot of what it comes down to is what is the initial intention of why you're doing anything at all. And that initial intention is sort of like, for anybody who's sort of like a Wiccan or something like that, you're going to find that the intention is sort of like the core thing. It's like the actions can both look the same, but the intention is what differs. In other words, if I'm feeling emotionally insecure and I say to Morgana, I love you, with the hope of her saying, I love you back, in order for me to hear it, that's not quite the same thing. Do you know what I mean? Like if I go up to her and say I love you just because I want her to feel love, it's a very different universe when I'm sort of like, oh, I'm in a little bit of fear, I'm a little bit uncomfortable and things like that. And so what ends up happening is when I talk to women about these sorts of issues, at some point we get to, well, but he needs to make me feel loved, or I need to feel loved, or I want to feel loved. And so I would argue ultimately that sort of like the greatest combat to that is to say, honor your relationship by kind of going at it no holds barred. Like, I'm here to freely give love and be of service, because when I do that, it comes back to me. But really, it ultimately comes down to is how much, for lack of a better description, unselfish action can I put into it? And that's the thing that works. I hope that answers the question in some part. I can get into the tree of life element of why that makes sense or why it might not make sense.
Oh, go for it.
Go for it?
Let's hear it.
Okay, so I'm going to give you like a 3-minute course on the tree of life. And this is sort of like the Lurianic perspective. It's sort of like the generally accepted version. You, wherever you're listening, you don't have to worry about this even in the smallest way. What you need to know is that the tree of life, I'm going to show it to you, a variation of it right here. It's pretty darn cool. A little bit further away. I made this at home in a wood shop a number of years ago. And so basically what had happened was that in the beginning, and again, this is sort of like the cosmology. You don't have to worry about whether it be valid or not, but the overall metaphor of it is the thing that's important here. So in the beginning, there was the light of the universe. And the light of the universe, its only goal really is to kind of offer love unconditionally. But the thing about offering love is that it needs to be shared with somebody else. So you share this love, but the light of the universe by itself didn't have any of that. So it created a part of itself, and we'll call that the container or the vessel or the receiver of that love. And so at some point there was the light in the vessel, and it was perfect relationship, at least for the light of the divine, the cosmic ooze, and whatever, because all it needed to do was continuously give this unconditional love. And it was still pretty good for the one that was receiving all the light. Really great stuff, right? It would be kind of like if I said to you, I am taking you out anywhere in the world, and we can go have a free lunch. Lunch is on me every single day. And one day we'd go to Alaska, and we'd have trout or fresh veggies or whatever you wanted, and it would be the best meal you've ever had in the whole world. And I'd say, great. Tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon, I'm going to take you somewhere else. Pick some other great place. Oh, you want chocolate fondues under the Eiffel Tower? We can do that. Great. Done. And then the following day, we do that. And then day after day after day, we do the same thing over and over and over again. So in Kabbalah, there's a concept called the bread of shame. Basically what that means is that you're getting a free lunch. And the free lunch doesn't take into account that over time to just receive over and over and over again to sort of like help out the light of the universe is kind of boring, because what becomes available or what becomes apparent is that, well, I really didn't earn all these free lunches, and I kind of want to be like the thing that's offering the free lunches. So it becomes a drag. Anyway, that concept became sort of what led to what was called the Tzimtzum, which was the separation of the light and the container of the light, because the container wanted to be like God, the divine energy, the cosmic ooze, the swirlings of love, whatever you want to call that. So there was a separation made. So the idea is that this thing that used to receive the light so freely and so connected was sort of torn apart. And when that happened, all of these little souls had nowhere to go to get its light, even though it was receiving the light. So this thing here, you can look at it, and this is sort of like the nutshell of Kabbalah, is that up here we have the thing that is offering all of the light. And this thing that's at the top of here is offering this perfection freely. It still wants you to have whatever it is that you want, go wherever it is that you want to go. And it's totally perfect. And at the bottom here, this is the illusion that we have that we're sort of separate apart, and we're not connected, and we're not happy, and we're not well, and things are problematic. So what we're dealing with is ultimately each one of these kind of ideals here, each one of them kind of, for lack of a better description, consider it like if you've ever been on a movie set or seen like one of those giant spotlights in a theater. What they do is it's very rare that they just have that top bright billion-watt bulb shining down. What they ultimately do is put stuff in front of it. They put like shields, a gel, some sort of a colored paper that sort of masks the light. And the idea here is that by the time you get down here, you feel pretty much lost, alone, separate, isolated, that nothing works out well. And really what I want you to look at this whole thing for the time being and just say that up here, you're feeling comfortable and happy and whole and light, and life is good, and you feel confident, and you know that you're gonna get the love and the things that you need in the world. And down here, your sort of default mechanism is going to be about fear, and how do I take care of me, and what am I going to do with my bills, and I don't have money. And it doesn't matter if you have a ton of money or not, you're going to feel some sort of a lack, some sort of a shortcoming somewhere. And ultimately, Kabbalah talks about that. That's the human condition. And so when you're dealing with this sort of perpetual lack with love, instead of going after love to find it, you're going to be worried about what you're going to get and what you're going to lose and how you're not going to get what it is that you want. And instead of going after the things like love and happiness and joy, you may be sitting and watching video games and locking yourself in a small room by yourself and convince yourself that it's just not worth the trouble. And so ultimately, when we're talking about how to overcome love problems, what we're really doing is talking about how do we overcome the illusion and the fear and the sense of lack and the malaise that things aren't good and that it can't possibly happen to me. And so we're going to talk about that love element, and I hope that's making sense.
Okay, a question came in from Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi. So how does she find a conscious guy like you?
Well, this is the secret to the ages, and this is the hard part. What I've just explained is really the solution to most every sort of problem that you're going to have. But what it means is, and when I first started doing this 20 years ago, this was all like a fine concept, but it couldn't possibly work for me. And so how do you find sort of like a right person? Well, you start with the right intention. And that right intention is that your job is to see beyond the illusion and really be unconditional with your love. What we understand about the top part of this very cool thing here is that this is sort of like an endless waterfall of goodness, and you can do with it what you want. So if you take this stuff and you feel fear and trauma and disease down here, and you behave accordingly without trying to kind of like, okay, I'm going to be of love and service, and trust that, you're probably going to perpetuate more sadness and discontent and all that stuff. So what I would suggest very highly to you is go find opportunities to be of love and service. And if you don't have a partner to do that with, then be kind and loving. Like literally, you don't have to start off like, oh, I'm going to rearrange my entire existence to keep being of love no matter what. It's really about like, oh, okay, I'm going to tip a little bit bigger because I want that person to have a nicer day, that person who's been waiting on me. I'm going to walk that little old lady across the street. I am going to tell that person that I love them without actually worrying whether or not they think I'm going to be weird for saying it or judge me for saying it. I'm going to go out there and be my authentic, most perfect self, just as I am. When I say perfect, I'm not talking about you need to do something in a perfect way. What I'm talking about is that you go out and be exactly who you are. And if you like, I don't know, Wizard of Warcraft, I don't know why I even said that. But if I go out there and really just be who I am with sort of wild abandon and trust, the universe. And for the record, when I was talking earlier that I was not a man of faith, shall we say. Like I've made more than my fair share of mistakes. Ultimately, what happened is I just took little teeny-weeny bits of action. Like I gambled with it. Like, okay, for a week, I'm going to try to do this thing, and we'll see what happens. And every single time, it paid off. And I started seeing through more and more of the illusions and started getting to the crux of, okay, when I'm happy, my life looks really good. Like I can not necessarily have a ton of money and still view my life as being totally rich. So I think you have to, what I ultimately did was I developed faith, not from sort of like a vague nebulous idea that there's like on the Sistine Chapel, there's a guy with a rugged forearm that was just going to take care of me. and that was it. Really what it was is I took small actions, and over time I felt confident to take larger, what I perceived to be risks, and it turned out to pay off in the end. So I recommend that you kind of like say, okay, for this week, I'm going to like pick 2 things a day. That's just going to be like, as the bumper sticker says, random acts of kindness. And you can do it, and I guarantee you, if you're conscious about it, and it's like, okay, I'm just here to provide somebody else with light, love, magic, whatever it is, good wishes, I'm going to find a little bit more happiness. And when you find yourself singing and dancing in the car, and you're like, you don't know why, and it's after this sort of action, don't be surprised that all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, this thing actually works.
I finally, genius here, figured out how to see the chat because I'm new to this Webinar Jam technology. So Christina wrote, after many heartbreaks, I feel unable to open my heart again. How do I learn to trust and be vulnerable again? Is it okay if I share like your heartache before you met me, briefly?
Well, I mean, I can do that, but if you want to, go ahead.
Well, I met Devin in August of 2012, and in February, I think, of 2012, Devin had been living with his fiance for years, thought that they were okay, came home, and she had moved out. And he didn't even see it coming. So I want to share that he has had his share of heartache, as have I. So how did you?
Can I actually put a little bit more information into that?
Please, yeah.
Okay, so what ended up happening was, and there's a couple stories that go with it, and I apologize for being long-winded, but that's sort of what I do, is that, I was with this woman, I really sort of expected that, okay, I've been sort of like the man that I wanted to be for quite a while. And so I just expected that this would be the person. And it was like, okay, there's some faults, there's some red flags, and I really had come to the conclusion that it's totally fine, because really I was leading a happy life and things were good, and I just assumed that the universe smiled upon me and gave me this person. All right, that's not really the way it works, but that was sort of like some of the thoughts that I had in my head. And so what had happened was I had left in the morning. Actually, I need to go back a few weeks early because there's a funny story attached, where at some point we were sitting together and she said, hey, I'm having some feelings about some stuff, and long story short, I said, well, if you want, I know people. I know Kabbalah with the Q people, and why don't we have sort of like an exorcism of our living space to remove negativity, and we'll have it a potluck. We'll have people come out, and we'll do some stuff, and we'll clear whatever negative is going on. So that's exactly what we did. These people came over, we had meatloaf, we had Cheez-Its, we had, we had really some terrible food, but the people were fantastic. And we went from room to room, and they chanted, and they swept, and they burned smudged sage, and they did all this kind of very fun stuff. And at the end of it, I said to her, well, how do you feel? And she's like, oh yeah, I can feel that the negativity is almost gone. And within 2 weeks, she packed her bags and left. And, in that moment, I can see my wife laughing. In that moment, while she was saying, hey, I think I need to go. I love you, but I need to go. I wanted to punch her in the face because I was hurt. And that was my reaction. But in that same reaction, I thought, well, I don't know if this is a good or bad thing, so I'm going to try not to judge it. And so when she asked for a hug, I wanted to punch her, and I gave her a hug instead. And when she was wheeling her bags, like after 4 years of relationship, like she was like packing bags like 15 minutes later, from like solid relationship to total disaster in 15 minutes. When I saw her like struggling with her bags, I thought, oh, I still want to punch her, but I'm going to carry your bags to the car for her. Because I ultimately knew that my job at that point was, if I really loved her, was to give her what it was that she wanted. That's the illusion, like the overcoming the illusion part which is scary and uncomfortable and it's tricky. And in that moment, I said, okay, I don't know what this means. And there's a story, another story attached that has nothing to do with me. It's just an old sort of like fable. And it's about an old village couple, and they're farmers, and they're getting older, and they can no longer run the farm. And all the villagers cried, oh, this is the worst thing ever. What will become of this poor old couple? And then the following day, the son comes in, who's able-bodied, and he's gonna run the farm because he knows his parents are old, and he's going to save the day. And all the villagers go, oh, what a blessing. This is the most wonderful thing that's ever happened. How wonderful to this couple. We're all saved. And then the following day, the son who's in the field breaks his leg, and the villagers go, oh, this is the most horrible thing in the whole world. And how terrible is this? And then the following day after that, the army comes to town looking for all able-bodied men. And again, all the villagers go, oh, this is the greatest thing in the whole world. And anyway, the story goes on for like a day. And the idea is that the reactions to things aren't necessarily based, because I don't know where it's going to lead. And so what had happened was I was absolutely heartbroken when she left, because I kind of was attached to the idea that this was the person who was going to be my person. And I was good with that. And so when she left, I was like, oh, how do I reconcile this? And this is painful and uncomfortable. And at the same time, when I started feeling better, it was like, okay, I'm going to explore love, because my feelings about love are not necessarily to be trusted. And so, long story short, I eventually ended up with Morgana. It's so far a wonderful, happy ending, and I am completely blessed. So I know I've gone off on like 10 tangents, but the idea is that if you want to attract sort of like a special, solid guy into your world, you have to start acting with intention, which is this specific one here. I think that's actually turned like that. When you start dealing with sort of like, okay, why do I want to be in a relationship? The next question should be, okay, what can I offer that relationship? Like, I don't know who this person is. Like, at some point, there's going to be a great guy who's going to show up in your world, and you're going to want to be able to already know how to act with love and be of service. So when he shows up, you're attracting a guy that isn't going to harm you. Like, one of the things that I had kind of actively sought out was the kind of qualities in a person that I would want to divorce. And that is that's actually in an ebook that I'm going to give you for free later on. So stick with us on that. But it talks.
Yeah, I was actually going to phase us into that. That Devin has a free gift, an ebook. I'm going to attempt to load it right now, and if I fail, Zach will. So, Zach, can you tell if this worked? Display offer. Okay, so hopefully everybody sees that. That is a great ebook. Okay, so.
By the way, it's an ebook I wrote for my daughter. Because she's now 15, she's going to be 16 in a couple months. I am a father. I have the choice to get shotguns, which I'm not opposed to. Or I can be supportive and try to give her what it is that I know to help her, deal with women, deal with men, because there's certainly a mystery there. So, anyway.
Oh, but if she chooses women, we're fine with that.
Yes.
So far, it looks like boys, but it's early on. And if there's any trouble displaying that, we will include it in an email afterwards to make sure that everybody gets it. So back to what you were saying. Sorry for that interruption. I just thought that was really important. And there were two questions that came in the beginning that really, spoke to me, because they're so painful and they're so common. Actually, three. The first one, let's start with the biggest, which is, he said he loved me and he disappeared. How would you address that?
Well, there's first off, I'm really sorry because it's painful and I've walked through it and it's really, really uncomfortable. And again, when she left me, I had to kind of reframe the difference between understanding that there was perhaps new opportunities on the horizon that I wasn't aware of, i.e., I have a lovely woman in my life and I'm incredibly grateful for. And so the pain that I'm feeling, again, is based in this notion that I'm afraid that I'm not good enough or wonderful enough or deserving enough of love. And so when that person leaves, that it's somehow a reflection on me. In another few months, you may consider yourself the luckiest person in the world to be rid of this person, for one, and two, to find a right partner. And I know that's sort of like a painful thing to hear, perhaps, when you're sort of like pining for this person and having sort of the same sort of expectations that I did, which was, oh, this will be my person, and I will now confidently stay with this person for all eternity. And the truth of the matter is like the universe provides us opportunities while I'm busy making plans. So I absolutely feel your pain, and I would absolutely believe that there is more for you out in the world in terms of relationships and happiness.
Oh, Devin will love this. Guess what? The download is leading to the 404 page. So, yeah, ARG. We'll take care of that. It was working when we tested it. That's really frustrating. So, there's the woman who, and there were a few of them, so this happened a few times. Yeah, I'm sorry, Jessica, Tana, Edna, that's Denise, that's infuriating. So we'll work with the host on that and just get a different opt-in company and make sure everybody gets the ebook. So there were a few people who talked about, how do I get my partner to make love instead of just have sex?
Yeah, that's another tough one, because I think, the funny thing, sex is great. The problem with it is that men and women tend to look at sex in different ways, and that, more importantly, people are frequently looking for love within sex, but it's quite easy to have sex without that level of intimacy that most people are looking for. And so, really, the goal is how do women communicate what it is that they want for men. And I go into this quite a bit in the ebook, which we'll absolutely send you and make sure that you have it. And I think it'll be useful for you because it'll give you some insight into men. Is that, again, men and women communicate differently. And sometimes, in my experience, is that I'll hear something, and the example I use, and it's not a great one, but I'm just going to use this example, is that I've literally walked in sort of like a clothing store and standing by a rack, and a woman has said to me, "Oh, don't you think that's a beautiful dress?" And like hold it up in front of herself, like, "Oh, you can see me in this dress, right?" Now, a woman would see another woman do that and go, "Oh, okay, she wants that dress, and she wants her guy to get it for her." And that's, for a guy, that's like, that never even registered as in anything. It just means like, oh yeah, why are you even telling me this? So what I try to encourage women to do is be really specific and loving, again, coming from this place over here, sort of like a place of love, to say, hey, this is what I want, and be like really specific, like talk to me. And I know I know that there's going to be some people out there saying, oh, you're ruining the mood. You're ruining this whole thing. You're supposed to read my mind, and then I would know that I was loved. Unfortunately, I think what you'll find is that when you start getting exactly what it is that you wanted, it's going to be romantic. Like if you get the right dress, the right kisses, the right hand-holding, the right love-making, those kinds of things, because you've been really clear and certain what it is that you're looking for. And by the way, there's one other aspect to think about here, is that sometimes the sex things about how do I get intimacy within sex, and sometimes it's like, well, but isn't sex supposed to be intimacy? And that's true. But frequently, again, when I've talked to, hundreds of women, it is often about, I'm looking for intimacy in my relationship. And it seems to be okay to ask for it within sex, but really it's okay to ask for intimacy. In the way I would just define that is presence of another person who loves and cares about you to really be paying attention for your needs and for your wants. And there's a ramp up. There's a ramp up to that, because, the truth of the matter is the illusion down here suggests that we are not mind readers, and we're not. We can't necessarily read the other person's mind. So what that means is we have to use other tools to be really clear about what it is that we're hoping to receive.
Two more questions jumping out at me. We have a question from a gay man, and I want to include, we do have a few men on here, so I really want to get them into.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that, guys.
So we have one man who writes, how do a gay man in my mid-50s who has no successful long-term romantic relationship with men, develop and maintain trust that the kind of love I see around me and so many other couples is meant for me?
Well, first off, to be quite honest with you, I can't say that there's a ton of sort of like information in any of the Kabbalistic major source literature. When I say that, I'm talking about the Zohar, the Bahir, the Sha'ar, or the Sefer Yetzirah. But it does say this, that we're all here for a reason. So gay, straight, whatever, we're all here to be offering and trying to deliver and revealing as much unconditional love and light as possible. I think that the suggestion I would give this gentleman is the same thing I would give most anybody, is that be of service, be of love, and start off small. And because what will happen is, if water tends to seek its own level. And so I know that from personal experience and speaking with, again, loads and loads of people on this exact subject, is that I think I'm really being of service, and then I attract a person who kind of lets me know, well, I'm in a relationship because I want to have a cute woman on my arm and walk into a party and have everybody think I'm really cool. But I don't necessarily, when it's like, it's easy to be of love and service when it's easy. But the idea here is to be of love and service when it's not easy. That's the time where you're going to reveal the most love and light into the universe. So the goal here is, if you've had a lot of short-term relationships, is to start taking smaller steps in order to say, okay, I'm doing this because once I find my right person, there's a lot more love and light that's released into the world. And that's what I want to do. I want to be of service not only to myself. And by the way, just this is like, I know there's a lot of complicated stuff in here, but consider this sort of like the material world, the material of the table. This next group that is the closest to this tends to deal with ourselves, like the things that I do, the things that I want. This next triangle, oops, I'm going in the wrong direction. This next triangle here deals with you, like other people in the world. And so all this stuff down is what most people live their lives at. This top three over here, that deals more with like ideas of sort of like the grander scope of the world, the universe, of God, society if you're an atheist. So these are much more difficult to kind of think. These are sort of like ideas that tend to deal more with the visionary kind of thing, long-term goals. And by the way, when I say women are smarter than men, because at some point you will get my ebook, I'm talking about this one right here. This is sort of like where women have been set. And so it's an interesting place. It's kind of complicated. I'm not going to go into it. But the important thing to understand is that, the idea of women is formed here and down here. sort of like the ultimate forms of receiving love, light, and creating things from it, which, as I'm sure you can understand, parallel between women. And men tend to be this group down below in the middle. And there's a big difference between here and here. This is perhaps why frequently women are looking and craving for a certain kind of spiritual connection that's a little bit more difficult for men to connect with. But this area down here tends to deal with we tend to deal really well with getting directions and having goals and having blueprints. Like, it's not the thing, but we want to know how to get to the thing. So I hope that helps.
And converting garages into offices.
Yes, that's right, because I actually do deal with blueprints. So anyway, my larger point here is that I think whether you are gay or straight, that there's absolutely an abundance of love for you. Part of the problem is that when we feel alone and separate and we're down here, it's hard to see that we're connected. So one of the ways to overcome that is getting a coach, getting even a really close friend to sort of like have ideas flow back and forth with. Because when we keep sort of like our brain running and it's kind of running in a negative place, and it's much easier to get out of that with the help of another person. Like, my brain needs constant supervision. And if you're like me,
I want to say here's the danger of a friend versus a coach. Mm-hmm. In my personal experience, is that your friends may be going through the same crap, and they may have the same limiting belief about there are just no good guys out there, and we're too old, and we're too fat, and we're too poor, and we're too this, and we're too that. And we tend to surround ourselves with people who reflect our reality, which, by the way, is a reason to, aspire to friends who model who you want to become, Mm-hmm. The value of a coach, the right coach, is the person who can help you get out of the environment that reinforces limiting beliefs.
Absolutely, and perhaps one of the most important reasons why that's really a great thing is that, when I work with people, I'm not emotionally invested in their problems. Like, I don't see their problems as reflecting who they are. I don't see their problems as being completely insurmountable. And I don't necessarily have the same perspective because, just from my own history and, extensive study of Kabbalah, both the Q and the K, and lots of other things, that sort of like, when you're in the middle of that really difficult, hard, complicated, defeating sort of problem, it's hard to see around that by yourself. And it's also hard sometimes for the people who love you to see around you either, because they're on their team, they want to support you. So if you're having, feelings, they want to support the feelings, and that sort of ideal doesn't necessarily get to the problem. Because really what we're hoping to do is have these feelings and move to solutions as quickly as possible, because otherwise you're wasting valuable time. So when I talk about friends, I am talking about a certain kind of a friend, somebody who's detached, somebody who's willing to help you along, but ultimately somebody who has zero attachment to your stuff is going to be the person, who's probably going to get you through that transformation the fastest.
Yeah. More questions. But I see we're heading to the top of the hour, and out of respect for people's time, I want you to share how people can get more from you after this, and then we'll dive back into questions. For example, I'm just going to name the next question we're going to answer, but instead of save that until after you tell what you have. So Denise wrote, if I'm actively transforming areas of my life, is it best to wait to look for love, even though I feel clear on what I value in a relationship? And we also have a really great question on strategy, texting strategy, letting the man lead, a lot of nitty-gritty stuff that I want to make sure that we still get to.
Okay.
But I know some people are going to leave. So, okay, we're going to try this. This one should work. Again, everybody with the ebook, We will take care of you.
We'll get you one. We'll figure it out, I promise.
Yeah. So, okay. Here we go. Oh, look at that face. So, all right. So what is the next step if somebody wants your help directly?
If somebody wants my help directly, bear with me. This whole sort of like coaching universe is like an interesting thing. It's not something that I ever really kind of looked into doing. But to be quite honest with you, I think there are like.
And but you've been doing this for 15 years.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. On a very regular basis, I speak to people multiple times a day. It is what I do. But in terms of like putting it online, in terms of sort of like websites and funnels and these other kinds of things, I don't get it.
Yeah, obviously we know what we're doing with that. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, we're working really well. But I do have an ebook, and it's there for you. But so anyway, so having said all of that, really what I do is I speak with people. I'm here to cheerlead for you and to offer you a perspective that you're probably not going to get anywhere else. So what I have is I have sort of a group thing that we're working on, which is about sort of like badass love, where we kind of get into this tree of life. And what's great about the tree of life, it really is sort of like a model that will help you compartmentalize different thoughts and ideas, so you can get a much better sense of like what's right for me and what's not so right for me. So that's going to be kind of more of a group thing where you're going to get a little bit more into the tree of life, and it's going to answer why you attract duds and why you're surrounded in a sea of duds. We have a module that's specifically on that.
It's a 6-module program.
Yeah, it's a 6-module module program. It's lots of Q&A to get you on sort of like a path to finding the love that you want. And also one-on-one coaching, which is certainly like if you have deep-seated stuff and you're in a lot of pain, that might be the direction you want to go, because group things, either way, we can do it however you want. But we have basically, I don't know if anybody can put a link up, but it's devingallaudet.com/the-assessment. And basically, it's just a way to answer some questions. We'll have a free 30-minute session. We can talk about the stuff that hopefully will get you over humps and get you on one of those two paths if you're looking to work with me more. And that's it. That's the worst pitch of all time.
It really is. Congratulations.
Yeah. I'm actually feeling it. I'm feeling the pain. I'm feeling my heart breaking to pieces right now.
I'm going to interpret for my husband here. So there are 2 ways to work with him. There is private one-on-one, and there is a 6-module, a 6-week group program called, I think, Tree of Life for Badasses, or Tree of Life for Badass Love. You, Devin, you have that in front of you.
Yes.
The way to get into either one is to apply for an interview, for an assessment session where the 2 of you are going to have a conversation to see which direction is better for you. And it's a free assessment, but please, only why would you do it if you don't feel interested in working with him? He's not going to coach you or solve any of your problems on that call. You will get value and clarity, but the point is really to find out what is the best way for you to proceed to get out of the sea of duds and into
there's a lot of sea of duds.
The big whopper of right love.
Yeah, absolutely.
Find that conscious, loving person out there that you want to spend your life with. And one of my absolute favorite, most romantic things that Devin says to me is that we pick the person we want to work through our crap with. I just wanted to make sure that when he said that to me for the first time, it was like the day after we got married for the first time. I was like, oh my God, I picked the right man. Not someone who's going to run when things get difficult, but someone who really understands that we pick the person that we want to work through our stuff with. And so he does things that trigger my insecurities. I do things that trigger his insecurities. And we stay together and get closer working through it. And that's why he's my unicorn. Okay, so let's jump into questions. And also, if you have any questions, Edna, thank you. By Michelle. Somehow she got the book. Fabulous.
Thank you, Michelle.
And, okay. Okay, even though the link led to a dead page, if you put your email into the web form, great. All right. Technology, I love it. Not. So back to Denise. Denise is actively transforming areas of her life. Is it best to wait to look for love, even though she feels clear on what she values in a relationship? What do you think, Devin?
Well, I would say that there's, I've been studying this stuff for 25 years. I'm not stopping. There isn't a break for me. I mean, these are just like some. I mean, if you saw the amount of books that I've been through and that I study on a very regular basis, it's mind-boggling. So this is an ongoing process. What I'm hopefully, really what I'm trying to do is to offer as much maximum service to the world as possible. Maybe that's a very altruistic thing, unless I'm crabby and obnoxious and all those other kinds of things, but it's a work in progress. So if you're working on yourself and transforming and trying to be of light to the world, bravo, congratulations. And my guess is that when you start sort of like offering your intention in getting a partner that would help you reveal that much more goodness and happiness out of the stratosphere, then bravo. I think it's a slight shift in perception leads to great change. This is a friend of mine, Pat, says this all the time. I love that saying. So it really is about like, okay, if you're ready for love, if you're ready for a partnership, and the important thing is, and one of the things that you'll find in my ebook, it really is about like, how do we define the goals? Because being in a relationship, what kind of relationship do you want to be in? Are you looking to get laid once in a while? Great, that's cool. But that's probably not the kind of relationship that you're going to be in for the long term. And if you're going to be in a long-term relationship, what is that relationship going to look like? What is it that you're hoping to accomplish with that relationship? And I think the more specific you get, the more likely you're going to attract a correct partner sooner. And so I think, our progress and process as people is never ending. So I don't think there's a specific time where you're going to be like, oh, I'm cured as a human being, and now I can get me some great person.
Okay, we have some really great practical questions. From Jody, what is text etiquette? She says, when I first meet a man. She says, I generally let him lead in terms of frequency, and I hold back as much as possible so he has something to pursue. Then I also make sure I don't drive the bus, and I let him take the lead in terms of when we make our next date, even though my nature is to lead. I see my role as just to be flirty and complimentary, but for him to lead. Is that right? Wrong? What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think it's neither right or wrong. I think it's just kind of like that's the path that she's choosing, and I think she can find great love by doing that. I would actually say it depends on how much time she wants to invest in texting. I think ultimately if you're really looking for a real long-term relationship, it's not going to be, maybe it'll be the first person, and maybe it'll be the first person who texts you. And I think if from what I understand you describing, is that you're going to find a person who's a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more kind of like control orientated, like, okay, this is when we're texting, this is when we're calling, this is when we're doing stuff. And if you take the back seat for that, I think you're going to find somebody who ultimately will be a little bit more demonstrative. And maybe that's precisely what it is that you need and want, and maybe it isn't. And if it isn't, you might be limiting your access to people who may not be as forthcoming. So
there's also, and I'm going to insert this as a woman, there are also 100,000 books and coaches who tell you, oh, you have to do this, and oh, you mustn't do that, and you've got to let the guy take the lead. What's your perspective on that?
Well,
because that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, no, and so here's the way that I look at it, is that our five senses are limited to just our minuscule scope. And so if we're riding on top of the water, we get to see the tip of the iceberg. It takes a lot more effort to see what's going on down below, and there's a lot more of that down below than there is the tip of the iceberg. And I would say all of these strategies and ideas tend to be like, okay, how do I solve my feeling or annoyance with something right now without actually investigating why it is? You know what I mean? Like, I get it. Like, we text each other now, but what is that solving? Like, a texting etiquette implies that there is some way that I will find love through text. Maybe I will, but the vast majority of my experience as a middle-aged person who's been out on many dates is that texting is fine, and when I'm sitting across from somebody, I know pretty quickly whether or not we have a future to move forward to. And I would say that most women have a much greater perception of seeing that thing in person or not. Because let's say if we have like a long back and forth with texting or phone calls, what it allows me to do is take my imagination and create something wonderful out of it when there might not be the kind of wonderful there that I'm hoping to see. So I would say that you're going to get a lot more truth and a lot more experience by kind of like moving past texting quickly. I mean, if you need to show up at a Barnes and Noble with, armed bodyguards and stuff like that, cool. But if you're feeling like you need armed bodyguards, then perhaps this is the wrong person you should be meeting under any circumstance. But I think you want to kind of like have a real interaction with that person, and typing tiny, tiny letters like this makes that less of a flow. Like, I can plan out what I'm saying, and it might be completely disingenuous to who it is that I am. But when we're having the flow of a conversation, I'm going to tell you who it is that I am much, much faster. So that's just my experience and opinion.
It also feels, having been in that position, that person for, decades and decades before I met Devin, there's so much fear in, if he doesn't like me, I did something wrong and it's my fault. I led too much. I was too flirty. I wasn't flirty enough. And one of the ways that I knew Devin was the right person for me was it was so easy to be myself with him.
So can I comment on that?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I love you to pieces. I'm grateful that we're together. So you have to remember that the more of a facade that you put up, the less likely the person across the table from you is going to be able to see through whoever it is. And at some point, your real self is going to be exposed. So the more real you are with yourself, and the less kind of like filters that you put in between yourself and the other person, like, if you put up a bunch of filters, they're not going to be able to see you. And the more filters they're putting up, the more likely you're not going to be able to see them. And that's really not the goal. What you're looking for is not to be loved by a whole slew of people. Oh, I dated Carlos or Jenny, 1,000 times, and these are great people. You're not looking for these are great people. You're looking for really the one right partner for lasting love. And of course, if you're not looking for sort of like a more permanent kind of thing, I'm probably not the right person for you. If you're looking for I'm looking for one right person, I'm looking for long-term love, I'm looking for long-term commitment, I'm looking for babies or not babies, or extensive hand-holding. Those are the kinds of things that we can look for long-term. If you're looking for short-term stuff, great, that's totally cool.
Oh, this reminds me of one of the questions that came in, because there's so much stuff about age and it's too late. And I actually found it easier to find a serious relationship-minded person and several serious relationship-minded people, but this was the right one for me as I got older. So we have someone who wrote in who's in her 60s, and she let me find the question because I think this is really, really important. This person writes, I'm 67 and relishing the solitude of being single. Maybe that's not the right one. There's somebody in here who is, later in life, Here it is. How does a person find another person who's really interested in the real thing? Now, that's not age relevant at all. But she goes on to writing, are there any men around 62 years old who want to actually participate as a lover in a relationship? Not just sex, you understand. I mean, real love. And I'm not interested in being someone's mommy who is my age. What do you have to say to that?
I have a whole bunch of things to say to that. Of course there are 62-year-old people. There's totally, whether there's 60, there's probably, I'm going to say that there's going to be an age range somewhere between, let's say, from the 50s to whatever. I mean, you know, the writer gets to choose the person that they get to date. There's totally slews of human beings that are looking for companionship and love all the time. I think that, how do I want to say this, is that the age part of it's sort of irrelevant. Again, I'm going to go back to what's the intention, what's the goal of the relationship. Okay, they want real love. So what's that real love for this writer? Is that writer looking to, be of support to this person, or are they looking to accomplish something else? Are they looking to receive for the sake of receiving because they feel that, oh, I should have somebody at this stage of my life? And so I think there's probably a couple of questions in there, but I think the most important thing is to recognize is that we live in a world with an unbelievable amount of people, and that when you take different action, you get different results. And so I would suggest that, again, a slight shift in perception is going to lead to great change for this person. She can absolutely find the love that she wants. It's there. It's like she can just kind of probably reach out and get it. But I think it's like, okay, what's your intention within that relationship? Get clarity on that, and I think you open the door for that sort of person to start walking in, and you start seeing that person more clearly, as I did with Morgana.
There was something here that I just I wanted to hear the answer of, and it's totally, totally self-serving.
I'm already smiling.
It was, yeah, I'm looking for it. Oh, yeah. What is the most intimate, non-sexual thing that makes Morgana the woman for you? Thank you, Shonda.
Why did you do that? Honestly, I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier. I think it was when I started. I mean, there's a feeling out period. Like, okay, she's a good woman. Let's see if she wants to go out again and again and again. But during that part, there is, like, as we got closer, there was more at stake. Like, my heart, like, the more we went out, the more there was on the line for me. It felt as a possibility of getting hurt. So I had to start really sort of like, okay, I'm still going to be loving, I'm still going to be supportive, I'm still going to act as if, that even if she turns out to be the wrong person, that I'm practicing for the right person to come along. So I'm going to be of love and service as much as possible, and the more I had sort of like on the line, and the scarier that it got, the more I attempted to sort of like, okay, what does all this stuff mean to me? Like, I wanted to take action that was really conscious and forthright. And so one of the things that I started seeing slowly but surely was what was Morgana's relationship like with her family? What was her relationships like with her clients? How did she treat me? Like, was it like crazy fireworks and lots of drama, or was she sort of like a kind and generous person? And it's a slow thing. I wish there was some sort of like a one thing, but that's her reaction was sort of the thing that sort of gave me a lot of hope, even when I was sort of like crazy and feeling jealous and feeling less than and all those other things, was that she was consistent in her behavior towards me, which was loving and supportive. And it just took I think there was a tipping point when I was actually on assignment in South Africa on safari in the Dikwe National Park. It's spectacular. Morgana was doing a thing in Bali, and what I was finding is that the only time we could talk was like at 4 a.m. my time, and I had to like be led because there were lions, like by a guy with a billy club, who would take me into this room where I could get internet connection, where I could speak to Morgana for like 4 minutes because there was like it was like this window. There was like 4 a.m. with me, and like her class started at 9, and she was in Indonesia, and so there was like, I'm calling you, I'm braving the lions, and we're going to talk for a few minutes. And all of a sudden I realized, oh, this is I'm acting as if this is really important, this phone call. And so I realized that that action that I was taking was very telling about sort of like what was going on deeper inside of me. And that's when I was like, okay, I get it. All right, she's the right one. And it wasn't fireworks and it wasn't pixie sticks and cotton candy everywhere. It was sort of like, oh yeah, this is a woman who I would divorce. Like, she would be kind and generous and supportive and understanding of, like, she wouldn't drag my name through the mud. She wouldn't do terrible things to me if I wasn't the right guy. She would probably just go, okay, this sucks, so I'm going to feel pain and walk through it. And so the more I had those realizations of the kind of characters that she had, gave me a much stronger understanding of what kind of relationship we could have in the future. And so, because I want to be of maximum service, here's this lovely woman that I get to participate with that. And knowing full well that we're going to keep working on ourselves and love, because I guarantee you, like, this sounds all fantastic, but I guarantee you she's going to give me a look later on about a garbage can or something. It's going to be that.
Oh, ladies, I was leading my goddess retreat in Bali while Devin was shooting animals with a camera, not a gun, in South Africa. And I was convinced he was breaking up with me that week. Every Skype call was, I don't think I'm the right man for you, or I don't think you're the right woman for me. And then out of nowhere, would you marry me? And when I've shared that with guys, they're all like, oh yeah, they understand. Totally, totally foreign to my girl mind. But he was working it out.
Well, and that's exactly what we do. Women definitely have a different thing going on in terms of like, how do we sort out information and stuff like that. And by the way, that's one of the things that's really important about my ebook. Again, it's free. I want you to read it, and I hope it gives you many blessings and insights. And one of those things is that you should totally have some very platonic guy in your life if you're looking to date who will
like
be
Devin.
able, huh?
Like you.
Oh yeah, totally like me. Who's going to be able to sort of like sift through some of the guys speak, because women are absolutely. Remember, I talked about this part over here. Like, women are over here. This is turned around. So women are over here, which is this part of sort of like this goddom. It's called the supernals in terms of its technical terms, but it has much more to do with sort of like this higher, elevated state of consciousness. And so women communicate in a whole different set of circumstances and understanding, but at the same time, I would argue one of the biggest downfalls that women have in dating is that they believe that men are as smart as they are. And I promise you, from the bottom of my heart, we are dodos. We don't mean to be. We are here to be your hero. We are here to support you. We're here to be on your team, and we want to do good by you, but we don't understand you. So when you leave those trails of breadcrumbs towards us, and you go, oh, he would love me more. He would love me if he figured out what was going on in my head. We won't. We're never going to figure it out. And we would if we could, but we can't, so we won't.
I actually, I think there are 2 times to hire a coach for a relationship. One is when you're single and you're looking for your person, and then one is when you find your person and you're freaking out and going crazy. And I did that twice with Devin. When Devin and I were early in the dating and I decided that I liked him, I was going insane. I was second-guessing everything. I suddenly had something to lose, and I became a maniac. So I worked with a coach on the side so that I could dump all my crazy with this person and then be sane again by the time I saw Devin. He didn't even know I did that until like 2 years later.
Right.
So I wanted to, we're running out of time, but I still want to get in some more questions. This one is from Catalina, and I think this is really important. And I think this is a question that women would ask and men would ask too, but I think it's actually much deeper than people give it credit, which is how to have a fulfilling sexual relationship taking into account that I like sex more than my husband or partner. How would you respond to that? Because I think that can be a big deal.
It can be a big deal. Again, it goes back to what is the sex about? Is it sort of the mechanics of it? Is it like we're talking penises and vaginas and orgasms? Or are we talking about creating moments for intimacy? You know what I mean? I think that no matter who your partner is, there's going to be some differences of something. Like, I want to go out and have pizza 5 nights a week, and the person I'm with is a vegan. That's actually, in this case, not true. But there's going to be some negotiation, and there should be some negotiation. It's that negotiation that is the part that leads this unconditional love. And I think there is a way to have this conversation that is going to be loving and supportive of that person. Like, the way you communicate isn't, I want sex more, and if I don't get it, I'm going to go find it elsewhere. That's a great way to rule in a relationship. Really what you want to do is kind of find a time when both people are sort of like comfortable, relaxed, there's nothing personal, there's nothing on the line, and then have like a real open, honest communication of what's the part that's missing. But before that conversation takes place, I'm going to assume the writer she wants obviously more, and it very well may be the mechanics of it, or it very well may be the intimacy part of it. And so there's probably another question that needs to be asked there. But either way you slice it, there should be sort of like, not in the moment when people's feelings are tied up and she's not getting what she wants and she wants to react to that stuff. It should be like, okay, let's sit down after work. It's not a big deal. I love you. We're together. Everything's great. However, what can we do together to solve this problem? And without question in my mind, if they've been in a relationship for a while, they're totally going to be able to come up with some sort of a negotiation to have a better sex life, a happier, healthier sex life, or if nothing else, so that she can feel that he's on her team, that he loves her, that he is supporting her, and he will help please her, in every room in the house.
Edna asks, can I give the ebook to my 15-year-old daughter? Edna, this ebook was written for Devin's 15-year-old daughter.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
Okay, we're getting close to the end. Let's see. A lot of stuff about past and fear. Let's take a look. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, so looks like Maricela writes that she's been single for 18 years, no dating, raised her kids. Now they are off to college. She recently tried eHarmony and Match.com but didn't like it, and it was very uncomfortable. What would you recommend as a good starting point to meet or start to get to know a man?
Well, I would say that, thank you. By the way, thank you for all these fantastic questions. It's been totally fun. What I would say is that you just have to take some sort of an action. And probably the more uncomfortable the action, and I'm not talking about doing things that are against your integrity, I'm talking about taking things that scare you a little bit. In other words, Match.com and eHarmony, those are great steps. And, what was funny for me is like, Morgana and I met online, and which I thought would never work. But the reason why I took that action was because it was forward-moving action to tell the world that I'm looking for love in a positive way. And writing out a profile gave me the opportunity to write the things that I wanted and to kind of get focused on the kinds of things that I could offer a relationship, as well as the things that I was hoping to find within a relationship. And so it gave me...
When you asked me out, what percentage would you say you believed I might be the one.
Oh, 0. Yeah, no, it was like a total goose egg. Yeah, no, an absolute null set.
Yeah.
You know, I took that action online again because it was forward moving action. Because my experience had been was like, oh, okay, I'll throw my name online. I'll date some girls over here. This will be great. How wonderful for me. And then I would meet somebody in a bookstore, or somebody would seemingly fall from the sky, or somebody I went to in 3rd grade, or whatever the case may be. I sort of expected that in terms of like a magical process that I'm putting out my intentions out to the universe, and the universe would provide a circumstance that would allow me to have love in my life, whether it would be permanent or sort of short term. And so when I signed up for this online thing, it was really like, okay, this is a great way to put my intentions out into the world and take positive action. But I didn't expect any results to actually come from that direct line. I thought I would like start here, and we'd be moving this way, and then really would go in some other completely different direction. I'd find like right here we are, right?
It's on you, right? So we are at 90 minutes, and I want to respect that a ton of you have stayed on for the whole time. Questions that weren't answered, Devin will. Oh God, I want that last one, but Andrea's asked me a couple of good ones, but whatever isn't answered, Devin is going to answer a question every week in his Kabbalah Love newsletter. We are not going to use your name. Your privacy is protected. What did you want to say, Devin?
No, I was going to say that I will answer every question. I don't know exactly whether I'm going to do it on video or whether it's going to be written or something else, but I will 100% answer every single question that I get. And I will let you know when it's live. You take a look. Feel free to comment. You don't have to comment. You don't have to let anyone know that it's your question or not. Again, your anonymity is going to be protected because I know sometimes our matters of the heart can be very sensitive, and we want you to feel completely safe to be honest and talk about your experience. And if you are sort of like looking for a little bit more personalized help, there's some options there. Again, Devin Galladay, I don't know if they listed the direct URL, but it's devingalladay.com/the-assessment. And Galladay is my name is right there. My fingers, I have giant hands.
It's one of the reasons I picked you.
Yes, I know.
Okay, Andrea asks, why did you choose Morgana Online?
Oh, yeah, no, that's a long story. I don't know how much we can get into it. She was cute. She had brown hair. That was about it. No, she actually wrote some, I don't remember exactly, but she wrote very specific things about the kinds of love that she wanted in her life. And that's kind of what I wanted to see. I mean, you have to understand, if you've been online before, you probably recognize that people write down things that are like, oh, I want to have fun, and I want to, I'm comfortable in jeans and in high heels. And, you read the same sort of nonsense over and over and over again. And I think what people are trying to do is like play it really safe. Because if I play it really safe and I don't get any results, oh, well, it's the world's fault for me not finding love. But really what she ultimately did is that she wrote really specific things, how she wanted to find love, what her love life looked like moving forward in the future with the right partner. And so that was the whole thing. So remember, I'm going to point at this thing one more time. Like, just remember, if there's anything that you're leaving here with today, this is it. Up at the top, think about ideas like acceptance and compassion and love and service and happiness. And the ideas down here are fear. And by the way, you don't want to do any of your actions out of fear. You want to take your actions out of love. So if you're in fear and you're concerned and you think that you're not deserving of love, I promise you that's just the inside of your head, and you should not be listening to it. Anyway, I think is that about right?
That's it. I love it. So if you want more of this irresistibly handsome, wise human honey, The way to do that is to fill out the assessment, and together you two can take a look at what it would look like to work together one-on-one or in a group. The best times to work with a coach is when you want to find love, and the other time is when you have found love and you're going crazy.
And by the way, the crazy starts probably around 6 weeks, because you have to figure the first 6 weeks are sort of like, I have nothing invested, this is an okay person. After that, when you're sort of like your heart starts getting tied up in what the other person's doing and how they're reacting and who they're calling and why they're calling, that's when to keep that relationship happy and whole is when you seek outside help, because then you bring the nonsense, and when I say nonsense, I say it with love, because we all have it. You bring the nonsense to somebody else, so you don't have to bring it to that new partner who's like, what? She's crazy, or he's crazy, or they're crazy, or whatever's going on.
Okay, so thank you very much for being with us. I think that wraps it up in a beautiful bow. You have met my husband.
Thanks for spending the time.
Bye.